All right, welcome to the Balanced Hormones Empowered Women podcast. My name is Abby Vallejo. I'm a registered dietitian, certified personal trainer, and health coach. And what I do is I teach women how to align their diet, their lifestyle, and their physical activity with their hormones in order to unlock their most vibrant health. And I do this through teaching a framework that helps them balance their hormones, lose weight, and repair their metabolism and get toned. So I also enjoy coaching through this process. And it's like a feminine based approach on, how can we optimize our hormones and live in alignment with our divine feminine wisdom. So I wanted to start this off by we're starting with my story, really. Like, how did this business come about? And what is my backstory behind it? Like, how did I live into getting in this position? So, basically, my history. It's funny. I didn't even start off in the holistic health world. I actually my first degree was in international relations. So, a little backstory about me: I was always really into language and culture, and I wanted to travel. I wanted to speak multiple languages. This is always something that I've really enjoyed, culture and language and exploring and things like that. So when I was a teenager, I was an exchange student and I went and I lived in Brazil for a year, learned Portuguese, and kind of caught the bug because I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. I can go live in another country. I can get a scholarship to do so. I would say that was probably one of the best and worst experiences of my life. Reason being, it was absolutely amazing. But, when you're 16 years old, you don't really know who you are. So going to live in another culture with a host family and showing up and like having to go to school and go to high school. I mean, high school's bad enough, right? And then going and doing it in another country in a language that you haven't really learned, in a culture that you're not really familiar with, and all the potential for, I mean, there's so many things that we worry about when we go to school when we're kids and we're teenagers, like, oh, am I going to embarrass myself? Am I going to, and then the potential for that is just magnified when we go to school in another country. So really good experience, but also terrifying at times. But I feel like it really did help grow my character. And, true to form, I really did catch the travel bug there. So then I was already thinking, okay, like when this year is done, what's the next thing that I can do to travel? So then my first year of university, I actually did it abroad in Spain, in Madrid. And, then I transferred to Miami and did the rest of my first degree there, which is international relations, with a minor in geography. Now, I was completely convinced that I was going to go and like join the UN and be a diplomat. And that was my dream for a long time. So I was like learning all these languages. I speak Italian, I speak Spanish, I speak Portuguese and English, of course. And, I wanted to put these languages to good use and go and be a diplomat. Well, that sounds great, but then I realized, I probably need a master's degree. I need to move to Washington, D.C., and then, just the state of politics in the world is just seemingly getting worse and worse. So I kind of decided, okay, maybe I'm not going to get involved in that. So I actually ended up working at a Brazilian consulate for a few years and then an Italian travel company, and just kind of started feeling like this was a dead end. During that time, though, I got more and more interested in health. So this is something that was a passion and interest of mine, but it was also kind of something that I didn't have a choice about in a way. Reason being is that I always had digestive issues when I was young. And I have so many childhood memories of problems with digestion. And for me, the big one was I would always feel nauseous all the time. Every morning, I'd wake up and I'd feel nauseous. And if I ate until I was full, I would feel nauseous every single time. Like hundreds of times, probably thousands after eating. I have memories of like laying on the couch about 15 minutes after finishing eating and just being in this like, oh, I feel so rotten. I feel like I'm going to throw up. I wouldn't actually throw up, but I was just always super nauseous. And I couldn't eat until I was full. So that led to the habit of me eating like snacking all day long, like tiny meals all day long, eating like a bird, always eating, never being full. And what I did is I just exhausted my digestive system. So we're taught there's that old kind of outdated piece of advice that's eat small frequent meals. No, no, maybe in a few cases temporarily, like if you're healing adrenal fatigue or something like that. But really, that mostly is not good advice. Reason why? Every time we eat, our body has to make enzymes. It has to make stomach acid. There is a cost to digestion, right? And if you're doing that so many times throughout the day, you're going to exhaust your digestive system. But I didn't know what I was doing, right? I didn't know that at the time. And the nausea is a lack of stomach acid, which I didn't know that at the time either. And so, my mom takes me into the doctor and they say, oh, well, she has too much stomach acid. They tell you the opposite, right? And so they wanted me on Prilosec, which now we've learned has, long-term side effects. And thankfully, my mom was like, no, you're not just putting her on Prilosec for the rest of her life. And I'm so glad that she had the wherewithal to be like, no. But, we still didn't have any like viable solutions. So I just learned to eat until I was about 70 to 75% full. And then I stopped. And so I was never really ever full, but it did kind of help manage the nausea, although it didn't do anything to help in the morning. And I had really dysregulated blood sugar. Like I'd wake up in the morning and I remember I would have to run to eat. Otherwise I would feel awful if I didn't eat immediately. Like I literally could not go 30 minutes without eating. I mean, anywhere I go, I had to bring snacks. I had to eat as soon as I woke up. I was eating all day long. It was really unhealthy behavior, but it kind of was the only way that I could manage it, right? So I didn't know that my stomach acid was very depleted and I didn't have any digestive capacity, which is why I couldn't eat very much at once because my stomach literally didn't have the acid to start breaking down that food and activate the enzymes that I needed to properly digest it. And then I had low blood sugar. So my blood sugar would drop and I would feel really awful. And that's why I had to be eating all the time to help manage my blood sugar. And that was the only way I knew how to do it. So I grew up with that. And that was something I just managed from a very young age. I was the kid in school that wouldn't eat sweets. I just a long time ago decided I wasn't going to eat sweets because they made me feel nauseous. They made me feel awful. And so I was the kid that everyone wanted to sit by in elementary school and middle school, when we'd have like class parties and people would bring cupcakes or cookies or treats or whatever, because I never wanted them. I mean, what kid voluntarily doesn't eat sugar? That was me. That was me, but it was my way to try and deal with all the digestive problems I was having. I remember like having I have this memory of eating ice cream as a kid and being so sick and just laying on the bathroom floor being like, why is this so painful? Right. So that had been going on my whole life. And when I was a kid, I didn't really, I developed some of these coping mechanisms. I didn't really think about it further than that. And then when I was, teens and 20s, I started getting more interested in, well, what does this really mean? Like, why is this happening to me? Surely there's got to be some solutions. And it also opened my eyes because I also was lactose intolerant. So, milk would make me sick. I could kind of get away with cheese. I think a lot of people who are lactose intolerant can get away with certain things, but not others, unless they have like a severe allergy. But I could get away with cheeses, but like milk would do me in. And then I remember traveling and going to Europe, and I remember in Italy getting milk first of all, it was fresh and it only lasted 3 days. And I remember drinking it and like not getting sick from it and having this revelation like, wait a minute, maybe it's the milk in the United States that something's wrong with it, or the milk that I was getting specifically. How come I'm in Europe right now and I can have this? I'm okay. Same with grains and gluten. That was another thing. So in the US, I would always get really, really bloated. And this got worse as I grew up. And, in my 20s, I was to the point where I was like bloated every day, just this painful bloating and discomfort and, embarrassing, honestly, because your tummy's all pushed out and you have to run to the bathroom a bunch of times. And I'm like, gosh, what's wrong with me? Like, do I have like IBS or something? That's something I had heard of, at the time. But it turns out it was gluten. And, when I'd go to Europe and I'd eat bread, I was fine. But in the US, I was not. And so this took me a while to figure out until I had a friend who pointed out to me, because I was like, well, I eat bread and, I feel fine. It isn't until later and I can't make the connection. And she was like, well, it takes at least 8 hours before you're going to feel the effects of gluten in your intestines. So think about what you ate at least 8 hours earlier. And then I was like, oh my gosh, yes, gluten. Like I need to eliminate gluten. So when I was in my 20s, I officially went sugar-free because I mostly had been doing that my whole life anyway. I've never been able to handle sugar very well, which honestly, I will tell you, has been more of a blessing than a curse. kept me away from the sweets. And then I eliminated milk. I mean, I still eat cheese, but I eliminated milk and I eliminated gluten. This changed my life. Oh my goodness. All of a sudden, I mean, it takes a few weeks to get that stuff out of your system and bring the inflammation down. But within a month or two of making those changes, I wasn't bloated every day. I wasn't running to the bathroom like 10 times a day. I mean, it was amazing. So life changing. So that was a big one. So, while I was like doing international relations and doing these other jobs that had more to do with like language and culture, I was experiencing these things and I was, starting to give up gluten and giving up sugar and, not drinking milk anymore and paying more attention to my body. And that was very empowering. So I realized that that's something that, was really important to me. And I feel like so many practitioners out there have their own health story. I actually have multiple stories. So these are a few of them. And then my other thing was birth control. And I think so many women have this story too, in our late teens often. We go on birth control because we're irregular and they tell us, "Oh, just go on the pill and it'll get you regular." And then, of course, you want to make sure that you're protected. So, I was traveling and going about internationally and everything. So, I wanted to make sure I had some form of birth control and be responsible. But then, so other than my digestive issues, I didn't have other health issues. So I was pretty darn healthy. Despite that, I was pretty darn healthy other than that. However, after I had been on birth control for a few years, starting in my late teens and then going into my early 20s, I started having all of these issues that were like alarming and embarrassing and just like really, big problems in my life that I couldn't ignore. So I started getting yeast infections, reoccurring yeast infections, which I had never had before, and suddenly I was having them all the time. And then I would go in, and they'd give me like Monistat and things like that, which would clear it up temporarily, but inevitably it would always come back. I started getting bacterial vaginosis. I remember one time I was so embarrassed because it smells bad. It smells bad. I'm like, why do I smell like a dead animal? Like, this is literally so embarrassing. And, go to the doctor. It's bacterial vaginosis. It's a, bacterial infection. So you go and what do? You get antibiotics. Well, then after I was on the antibiotics, no one told me I had to go on probiotics to replenish the good gut flora that gets killed off by the antibiotics. So then suddenly I am having reoccurring yeast infections again. So it turned into this whole cycle of, I'd have a UTI, I'd go in for antibiotics, and then I'd get a yeast infection or I'd get bacterial vaginosis because, antibiotics, while they will often do the trick when it's a bad infection and, sometimes you do need them, they also kill off all your good gut flora too. So you have that good gut flora that you need to keep you healthy and in balance. And if that all gets killed off, it's like killing all the healthy plants in a garden and suddenly all the weeds take over, right? So I started on this cycle of UTI, antibiotic, yeast infection, bacterial vaginosis, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. And it was a complete nightmare. It was a complete nightmare. And I had no idea all the damage I was doing to my gut at the time with all these antibiotics. And then I start getting other symptoms like hair loss. My hair literally, which is, naturally curly, started growing out straight and not in a pretty way, not in the way that every curly girl secretly wished for, but I mean like dead, lifeless. And then it started breaking off, growing out straight. I got a bone fracture. And I had like vaginal dryness. I mean, I started getting symptoms of menopause basically in my early 20s. So I would have hot flashes. I'd have night sweats, vaginal dryness, low libido. I'm like, geez, I'm in my early 20s. Like, what is wrong? I've never had any of these problems. Now, granted, obviously having gut issues that could lead to nutritional deficiencies and things like that, which were a part of my problem. But then I get on something like the pill, and that causes major nutritional deficiencies, mineral deficiencies. B vitamins are a big one. I mean, it causes lots of deficiencies. And most of the time we're not warned. My doctor certainly didn't tell me when they put me on birth control. No one said, oh yeah, you might want to get a multivitamin. You might want to take some B vitamins. You might want to take some minerals because this is really going to deplete you and you're going to end up having symptoms. No, not a word. So all of a sudden, couple my digestive issues with a few years of birth control, And I am a hot mess by my early 20s, not to mention anxious and, triggered by all of these things and just feeling so lost, right? And so I go into my gynecologist and I'm like, hey, and it was a guy. I was like, hey, something's really wrong. And I think it's the pill because I'm having all these infections that I've never had before. My hair is falling out. I just got like I cracked my ribs. I'm having vaginal dryness. I'm getting hot flashes. Like, this is seriously wrong. Something's wrong with me. And the only thing that's changed is that I've been on this birth control pill. And he's like, oh, you're just being dramatic. What were you on Google, like reading? You're kind of making it all up in your head. Like, it can't be the pill. It's absolutely not the pill causing your problem. And I was like, yes, it is. But when you're young, you don't always know how to stand up and advocate for yourself. But I knew, even at that age on the inside, I'm like, yeah, this is the pill doing this. So I went home and started doing my own research. I wasn't a very good researcher at the time, but I started, and I found out indeed, the pill has been shown to cause yeast infections, put you at higher risk of UTI, bacterial vaginosis, can lead to vitamin and mineral deficiencies, which can lead to hair loss. It depletes your hormones. So now I do a lot of hormone testing with my clients. That's an area of expertise of mine that I've specialized in because of this. And so often, I mean, really every single time when a woman comes in and she's been on the pill, no matter how old she is, her hormones will be depleted. Like, she'll look like she's like postmenopausally low. She'll look like her hormones are where she's 70 years old and she might be 20. And that's what mine were. They were just completely tanked. So when you put in that artificial hormones into your body, which is what the pill is, it ends up tanking your natural hormone production. So I was just completely depleted. So like low estrogen is the main cause of hot flashes and night sweats. But I didn't know that. And, gynecologist didn't tell me. So that was a long time coming and figuring that out. So I decided I was going to go off the pill and kind of rebalance. And me not having any guidance, not being a practitioner at the time, being in my early to mid 20s, I just went off the pill and I didn't really do anything else to, I didn't take any supplements or multivitamin or anything like that, magnesium or anything to help rebalance. It took, probably 6 months to a year to get my hormones balanced again. So for anyone who's gone through that journey of getting off the pill and just feeling crazy and all of a sudden maybe their skin's breaking out like crazy when you were on the pill it wasn't, and the emotional roller coaster ride that you go through because you had your body was pumped full of these synthetic hormones and then suddenly it's not, and it's like desperately trying to recalibrate. We feel a little crazy. Right? So that was definitely quite the experience to have gone through, and it really opened my eyes to, there's a lot of well-meaning doctors out there, but that doesn't mean that they know what's best for us as women. So that's really where my general interest in health, from my digestive problems to my hormonal problems from being on the pill, I kind of started putting two and two together and being like, okay, yeah, I want to go back to school and actually do something, because I want to be the person that women can come to and actually be listened to and actually do something to help them. Because I feel like, as wonderful as modern medicine is in a lot of ways, it's not. And especially when it comes to things like this, like hormone health. I just feel like women are falling through the cracks of the system. So many women clients come to me and they say, well, I went to the doctor and my options were an antidepressant or birth control. And that's it, rather than what about investigating the underlying cause, right? So, and the problem with this is that our modern medical system is built for men, and almost all of our studies are done on men. So it makes sense that our methods of treatment are based off of how men's bodies respond to things and not women's. And so really, when I went back to school and became a healthcare practitioner, became a registered dietitian, my goal was to work specifically with women And then as I became more hormone proficient and, learned about hormones and, I remember when I turned 35, I did this really deep dive into hormones because I'm like, oh, I'm in the 35 and older category. Like I want to get my hormones tested. I want to know where I'm at and, get myself all in gear before I even get close to menopause. And just knowing how much of a hard time I had had in my 20s with hormonal imbalances, I was like, I don't want that to happen to me again. I want to be on top of this. And I want to teach other women how to be on top of it too. And so now that's why, like I said, I teach women how to align their whole lives with their hormones. If you think about it, we as women are cyclical beings. Every month we have a cycle, right? And even more than that, we actually have 4 different hormonal phases that we go through every month, like clockwork, again and again, the same 4 phases. And in each phase, our needs are a little bit different because we have a different hormone that's coming out to play. And they either want more physical activity or less. Maybe they want us to eat more carbs or less, So that's what cycle syncing is. If you've heard of cycle syncing, it's basically syncing up your diet and your lifestyle and your fitness with where you're at in your menstrual cycle. And that is the ultimate biohack. And this also applies to women who have already gone through menopause too, because you still have the same hormones, albeit in lower levels. But think about how many years you've been cycling, right? And you still have those same hormones and they still respond, they still have the same cyclical needs. So this has been just learning about hormones and then taking it that step further of not just, oh yeah, I know about hormones, but how do I apply it and live my life in a way that's best for a woman, right? And don't get me wrong, I love men. No shade to men. I'm not here to diss on men at all. But we are not small men. We are women. And our needs are a little bit different than men's needs are. And they change throughout the month. Men aren't cyclical creatures the same way that we are. So when we're living in this man's world and this man's society that's set up for men to be healthy and men to thrive, it's not set up for us in the same way, right? So it really resonates with me, not only feminine health, but also like the feminine approach, right? Feminine energy, kind of this feminine renaissance of bringing in a whole lifestyle and mindset of how do we balance our feminine in a way that makes sense with our innate feminine wisdom and our cyclical bodies with their cyclical hormones and cyclical needs. So that's what I teach. Now maybe I made that sound complicated, maybe not, but it's really amazing and it's simple. And when women learn this, they're like, oh my God, this just innately makes so much sense. And I just feel so good on this. So that's something that I'm really excited to share and teach about. And thankfully, there's lots of other female practitioners out there on the leading edge who are teaching this as well. I didn't invent cycle syncing, but I do teach it. So that is really something that really I'm very, very passionate about. So that is what this podcast is about. And my other goal with this is to share stories. So I want to share wisdom. I also do a lot of research. So I like to share that with you in a way that makes sense. I like to take complicated issues and make them simple. So I will be sharing health advice. Now it's not medical advice. Obviously it doesn't replace, your medical advice. I'm not your doctor. I'm not a doctor, but this is health education. So what I want to do is I want to inspire you with knowledge so that you can do more of your own research and you can go and talk to your doctors and be an advocate for yourself. And I also want to do it, from this feminine approach. So my other goal is to share stories from my own life and also stories from other women, from friends and colleagues and clients of ways that they have dealt with certain issues and health problems and ways that they have overcome them. And often how we've done that together and the insights that have come from that. So I am so excited to get this podcast going and put the knowledge and the wisdom out there, but also have this be a community aspect of the sharing of stories. And I hope that it can empower you through knowledge. So stick with me for the next episode. Can't wait to see you there. Thanks for listening.